G'day everyone, welcome to the latest edition of Market Watch, brought to you proudly by TopSport.com.au. I tell you what, we are on the eve of the second test match and there is all sorts of things going on. We'll get to them very shortly. First up, time to say g'day to our regulars here. Yes, that's right, the usual suspects are in attendance. I'm talking about the number one seed from TopSport.com.au, Tristan Merlehan, and Mr. G, Gerard Condon, on the line. How are we, boys?
Yeah, very good, Jimmy. Yeah, as you say, plenty of breaking news. We're just filming this on Thursday mid-morning, and there's just news breaking about Paddy Cummins. So I'm sure by the time everyone's listening, this will be more info out there. But as a result, we're going to have to try to make some assumptions over the course of the next half an hour or so. But it's been a big week in sport. Plenty of news. Obviously, lots of drama over in America as well, with the number of players pulling out of the round of the NFL action. So lots of things to keep us on our toes, and looking forward to chatting through it all today.
Yes, well, it's just a moving feast everywhere, isn't it? We've been watching in the last 10 days in the US, the impact across NBL and NFL, and tens upon tens of players in different teams being stood down. Now, all of a sudden, we have the impact here on the test series, and a test that will start today. I mean, well, what big news if the Australian captain ends up having to stand aside because he's a close contact, and then potentially what impact that then has across the rest of the team. And I'm sure this is unprecedented times. I mean, Jimmy, what happens if we're sort of day three into a test and all of a sudden there are players in the Australian team that test positive who weren't considered at risk when the test started? Well, we've not ever seen anything like this.
If it's 6 players test positive, it's test abandoned, right? That's an easy one. If it's 1 player, what do we do there? Is this the modern day equivalent of, oh, well, they got a really bad stomach bug and they're now unable to take any further part in the test match? It's a most unusual situation. As it stands right now, Pat Cummins looks like he's a close contact of a fellow diner at a restaurant in Adelaide a couple of nights ago. So, we still don't have clarification whether he's being stood down. The statement coming from Cricket Australia very shortly. Further speculation that Josh Hazlewood was at the same restaurant. Apparently the patron got notification right there that they were COVID positive, got up and basically told everyone around them, hey, I've just tested positive to COVID. So it seems funny in that period of time that we've had a press conference from Pat Cummins and announcement of team and all sorts of stuff with host broadcasters, and that wasn't mentioned. Maybe it was there in the background. In New South Wales alone, we've gone from 803 cases to 1,360 to today, 1,742. They're saying brace yourself for 25,000 positives a day come the end of January. That's just mathematics. The interesting thing, most of it they believe is Omicron, and the situation with that is that it's not as severe, and therefore the hospitalisations are a lot lower than previous strains. But in saying that, it's still a real concern, and from our point of view, from a sports point of view, it's very, very concerning. Before we go forward, let's look back. How did we go, Gerard, with our NFL bets last week?
Well, Jimmy, we ended up with 3 bets last weekend, 2 from 3 across NFL and racing. The Dallas Cowboys did the right thing for us. They certainly covered the 4, got out to a very big lead. Late comeback from Washington, but a nice result there. Dear oh dear, you just couldn't hold that scoreline back well enough on Tuesday, Jimmy. The Rams and the Cardinals, we had under 52, and bang, there's a late field goal that takes it to 53 points. But then Brooks Spire did the right thing on Saturday, won by panels the last of the day, and that was another nice collect. Tristan, a bit concerned that we might need to update the terms and conditions of these lunch bets. I just find it amazing that Jimmy's up and about and jumping around, and he's claimed the lunch bet when he finished second in a race. So here we are getting collects everywhere else, but Jimmy's knocking up another lunch bet.
I can see that smirk on his face now. He's very happy with himself. I think a good second is sometimes as profitable as a handy winner. So I was sitting there as an innocent bystander watching the communication between you two last week, and I can understand the thrill of running that second. But yeah, we've got some good cash in the account now. It's gone up to 2,374. We are going to actually put that into the kick this week for passing on clothing. So we'll get 2,374 in there to give them a bit of impetus leading into the the Christmas appeal. So great stuff. Plenty of winners, as you say. And the lunch bet is really starting to take shape.
That's fantastic, Tristan. So well done, everyone involved in that for Pass It On Clothing. Just going back, I just want to pick you up on a point that you made there, Tristan. You said the communication between you two, and I would actually say that it was communication from me to Gerard and a lack of response. So when I spoke to him a little bit later on, a few days later, I said, hey, what about Ellsberg getting in? He said, no, Ellsberg ran second. I said, yes, but read more closely the terms and conditions of the lunch bet. It was whoever finished in front. So, I'm very much looking forward to now that Anastasia's led all of us Southerners into Queensland coming up. And I was going to say collect, but I think that makes me now at about -4 when it comes to lunch bets.
The good news about that statement, Jimmy, is that the phone reception is back up and running again, because I know there has been some difficulties there. So the fact you're on the call is even better. And maybe we should go and look at buying some shares, and we can all pay for some more lunches.
I was at a staff Christmas party Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening last Saturday, obviously, and I'm getting all these messages from Jimmy celebrating the fact that Ellsberg has run second, and I'm looking at this, I'm going, what the hell? I mean, he hasn't even had a bet on this to run a place, and then Brooksby Spire wins, and there's no corresponding messages from Jimmy, and I'm thinking, dear oh dear, one of us has either had too good an afternoon, or backing seconds just don't pay.
It's funny how that text message went through at least about 35, 36 seconds after the race was completed too. So that reception working very nicely here. Before we get to the cricket, I want to go back to a result, and we'll look at it. It was one of those games we missed out on the overs and an unders, and I talked to you about an unders bet, didn't I, Gerard? But anyway, what do we make of the Los Angeles Rams? The people I listen to out of the US are saying this is a really, really high-level performance, and maybe now Matt Stafford is falling in, working out exactly what is all around him, notwithstanding Odell Beckham Jr.'s COVID positive. But between the two of you, Tristan and Gerard, is it the rise and rise of the LA Rams based on that performance last week against Arizona?
Yeah, as we spoke about earlier in the season, I've been a big fan of the Rams for a long period of time. I thought they were really looking the goods early in the season. And then they went out and recruited a number of the pieces of the puzzle to really help them defensively. And when that occurred, they sort of fell off a cliff a little bit there. Their record was ordinary for a while, when you expected them to probably improve. But as we know, it takes a bit of time to get the cohesiveness there together with new bits of the puzzle. And that win against Arizona away from home is a really, really key win in a match where they scored plenty of points. As you say, Matty Stafford is starting to really look good. It'll be interesting to see how they go over the coming weeks leading into the playoffs, but I expect them to be hitting their straps. They take on Seahawks this week, which should be a pretty straightforward victory, you would assume. But with everything that's happening with players in and out, nothing can be taken for granted. But I'm looking forward to seeing the progress of Matt Stafford over the next couple of weeks.
Well, it's certainly a statement game for them, Jimmy. You're right, because the 14 prior occasions that Stafford had played quality teams at the top of the seedings in the NFL, he had come up with 0. That's the first occasion. So that's 1 from 15 that they've been able to beat a team in contention with Stafford at quarterback. And it was certainly a statement game for him. That 52-metre touchdown was just amazing in the first quarter. And that was certainly their best form game. They have a very, very good coach, in my opinion, their head coach. He's just a very positive guy who's just got a great rapport with his players, but I think tactically is also very, very clever. I think they've looked to be building for a number of weeks. All of a sudden, Beckham is now getting more ball, clear ball, and turning them into touchdowns. We saw some really good work from Von Miller, who was another key signing over the last 6 or 7 weeks. So certainly I think that a lot of the pundits that are speaking about this out of the US, of them now starting to come together in December on a run towards where they might be in the finals. Now, the big trick, though, is as has been the case for recent seasons, the NFC is just so heavily packed with the real contenders. And then on the AFC, realistically, we've only got the Patriots and I think probably the Chiefs as the 2 contenders. So the Rams are going to have to make their way through that. At the moment, they sit number 5 in the seedings there. I think in the updated power rankings out of the US from any of the respected analysts, We've got the Rams 5th in line. And so, they've still got a little bit of climbing to do, because above them, we've got the Buccaneers and we've got the Packers on a very lopsided NFC side of those seedings. But, they're great to watch. And I just thought that it was a highlight attacking game. And we saw some great attack last weekend, which I think was also a pleasure to watch, because I think in prior weeks we've seen some really dour games. And to see, the Buccaneers and Bills come up with what they did, that last play from Brady. I want to touch on that in a moment. But then, the Cowboys get out to a comfortable margin, and then such an attacking game. And, the Cardinals got beat, but, gee, there's still a player in this.
Chiefs and Patriots, you mentioned there from the AFC, and, of course, they've got the best defensive records in the league. So that's an interesting part coming out of that. We'll get to more NFL very shortly. Let's go to the test match, quickly looking back to what happened up there at the Gabba. Don't know if you can remember day one, Tristan, but apparently you were there. So that was great from an Australian perspective, but a little bit of a rearguard action. Joe Root still can't get that triple figure score, but it was all Australia. Assessment of that test match, Tristan?
Yeah, well, from the bits I do remember on day one, it did seem like the, and I think it flowed through to other days, that there was a big disparity in the batting conditions depending on the session. So there was a lot of wickets falling, obviously fell in session one and then straight after lunch. And then obviously we missed the back end of day one. But the English batsmen really looked, Merlehan and Root looked really comfortable at the crease when it got late on day three. And then we saw the collapse on day four. So I think it's a really interesting one. I think it was such an important toss to lose. And I think it would have taken a very brave captain in test one to put the other side in. And obviously Root decided to bat, and in hindsight, it looked the wrong decision, but it's very easy to criticise in hindsight. So I think there was a level of fortunate side of things for the Aussies to be served up the conditions they were. Now the foot on the shoe on the other foot, with now the Aussies looking to be in a position where perhaps they're getting the luck the other way with a couple of injury concerns and obviously the news breaking about Cummins. So I thought it was a really interesting test match. I think as far as Australia dominating, of course they did, but England's got a couple of bowlers coming back into this side. Maybe the form of Root and Merlehan might sort of put themselves in a stronger position. It's going to be interesting what happens in Adelaide.
I think the key problem with this English attack, if we call it attack, is that they just don't have a bowling lineup on this tour, let alone what they're picking in the test, that take 20 wickets to be in a position to win a test. Unless they get conditions to suit in this day-night game where they get bowling at night and able to swing possibly and those conditions. Outside of that, I just don't see how they break through. I mean, they've brought Leach as their international spinner. I mean, if he's up to test standard, I'll give up. And all the mail seems to be that he will probably now be dropped and miss here. That would mean that they probably go with Anderson in. There's question marks whether they do or don't with Broad. And then rely on Wokes, possibly Wood, Robinson, Stokes as their bowling lineup, and take no spinner into Adelaide. I mean, when was the last time we saw a test match in Adelaide where an international side of any flavour doesn't take a recognised spinner? And again, I think that this is going to be the issue into the remaining tests of this series, that where and how do they take 20 wickets?
Yeah, I'm actually going to disagree with you wholeheartedly on that. But what I do agree with you on is they're getting their selections completely wrong. Jack Leach cannot play another test this tour, because every time, once you get Australian batsmen coming out leading up to a second test, they say, oh, you've got to pick Jack Leach. You're like, well, that'll do me. But I mean, they just attacked him so strongly at the Gabba and basically hit him out of the series, which is really, really targeted approach to that. I actually think if they had a different mindset in Brisbane, if they did have the ability to win the toss and bowl, but to do that, you had to say, well, I want Anderson or Broad. Don't have to take two of them, Anderson or Broad. And then you've got Robinson, you've got Wokes, and you've also got
Stokes.
Wood.
And Stokes.
Stokes is your bonus. Like you don't have to get that many. But Mark Wood had David Warner jumping around everywhere day two of the test match. And that's the difference. When you bowl 145, it's terrifying. You know, even for accomplished international cricketers, it changes your technique a little bit. And yet here they are, they're going to leave him out of the next test match. Like the Australian batsman will be going, well, thank heavens they left him out. You know, Chris Wokes, he might be a stronger bat at 8, but for the sake of a hooping in-swinger from Mitch Stark, the 8 doesn't score runs anyway. If your top 6 can't score your runs, or let's put Butler in there at 7, forget about ensuring that your number 8 adds some to the tail as well. So their whole mentality is wrong, England. And I actually wouldn't mind them going in without the spinner at Adelaide because it is a day-night test match and because it is the pink ball. But I still don't think they've got their attack right. Wood in for Stokes, and then I give them a hope. But not only because of who they're playing, but the mentality that sees who they're playing is a concern for me.
Well, I'm not sure where we disagree here, Jimmy, because I touched on this last week. I just couldn't believe the negativity that they started into that day one of that test in leaving both Anderson and Broad out and not playing at least one of them. And then secondly, they just do not, in my opinion now, have the attack to be able to consistently take 20 wickets and win test matches. And yes, they've got to leave Leach out, but they've come here and then they're not going to have another quality international recognised spinner to play in Adelaide or any one of these other tests. And if they do go with that bowling attack, yes, I agree, Wood bowled very well in the first test and did have Warner in a lot of trouble. But I think that's also a lot more to do with Warner's current form than possibly consistently good bowling. And, you know, we know that there's some problems in the top order for Australia, and but the key for Australia is that they have a bowling attack that can consistently rattle through teams. And that's the game changer here and will be the game changer through the series.
Tristan, how has this market shifted? Because now Cummins, obviously Hazelwood is out as well. Richardson in, maybe Nessa gets that test match. What's the market responded in the last 20 minutes or so?
Well, as we've been doing this chat over the last 15 minutes, it's moving considerably. It was $1.53 early this morning about Australia, and England with $3.75. Just when we started chatting in our little warm-up before we came on here, is $1.65. Australia's now out to $1.72, so they're very hard on the drift, which to me would indicate it's very unlikely Cummins will play. So $1.72 Australia, $3 England, and the draw's out to $7.25. England's come in significantly. And I agree with what both of you guys are saying, but I think the onus is on the England batting lineup to score runs. And I think this could be the biggest blessing that they've received. If you remove Cummins and if you remove Hazelwood out of that attack, these guys are going to get the opportunity to find a bit of form in a test match, which will give them confidence, which then may give them the impetus to make those brave decisions that they've been scared to do over the last little bit. I think they've been very lucky with what's fallen in their lap this game, but the betting's certainly moving in England's direction.
I'll ask you both. Are we okay with Steve Smith captaining Australia? Because that's what we're looking at.
No issue for me.
I'm wholeheartedly in agreement there. I think I always thought it was a strange decision to bring him in as vice captain if you weren't of that comfort level. And the fact they've done that, the board have obviously approved it. In my view, he's done his time. He's paid his penalty, and he seems to be doing the right thing. So for me, it's certainly a yes, and it'll be interesting how he goes. There'll be a lot of focus on it.
I just also thought last week in that test, it was really obvious Smith's input quietly from second slip. You know, he was talking around the slip cordons, in between overs, you know, just softly, some really nice, positive, strong leadership. I mean, he's a standout leader, and I certainly think he needs to be the captain if Cummings is not playing.
And you know, with the work we've done with Brad Haddon, these guys see stuff coming, and it's I love the fact that Pat Cummins was very open to input from Steve Smith, and that's an obvious one. But sometimes ego gets in the way. That wasn't the case with Pat at all. I love the fact when Cameron Green took the catch, I'm trying to think, it was Stokes from the bowling of Cummins. Cameron Green took the catch at Gully and pointed immediately to Steve Smith. And I've got no doubt that Steve Smith in a huddle or at the break went, you know, we'll get this bloke at Gully. Look what he's doing here. We'll get him at Gully. Like, these guys know these things. They see it coming. So if you're not using that, then that's ridiculous, because you've got all this knowledge of the game that would potentially be going to waste, Gerard.
I think the other thing too, Jimmy, was I just thought Pat Cummins all the way in the days leading up to, all the way through that test, just handled himself with aplomb. I mean, I think he really does look a standout leader and a first-class appointment. And I think, you know, with he and he may not be playing this test, but with he as captain through this series, I think he'll grow into that role into the coming years. And with Smith as a vice captain, I think we're in very good hands.
And what about him? I mean, 5 wickets in the first innings. He's now doing razor ads. He's doing energy ads. He could feeding himself ice to Eskimos. I would suggest that the demographic that's watching Test cricket now has skewed female quite significantly, given Pat Cummins' involvement. All
Jimmy,
right. Do we have a play, boys, in this Test match? Do you have a recommendation here at all?
I'm staying away, Jimmy. I just, I still take $1.75 about Australia because I just can't see that England are, going to get those 20 wickets. But you're right. I mean, if there's no Hazelwood and there's no Cummings, then all of a sudden Australia are playing with a blunted attack. But after that first test, I just hate the English mindset.
What I'll be doing, and obviously this is all breaking on the back of where we're heading to, but I'd be really trying to maybe look at some of those batting centric markets. Like obviously going into this match with the draw, and it's still quite a high price, but the draw is up near $7 or $8, which is the highest price I've seen for a long time in a draw. But I think when you miss Hazelwood, you miss Cummins, there's going to be a few more runs on the table for England. So I feel the market is still going to be committed and skewed to a really low number. So whilst I'm not saying England's batting eyes have disappeared, I think it's going to be a lot easier to score runs than what they originally thought. So I'd be looking at a few of those, maybe England type over betting options, looking at the total runs. I'm just seeing the boys are reframing the market now, but that'd be the play that I'm looking at it, because it's just a completely different mindset this game now.
The problem with that English batting lineup, though, is, I mean, day 4 at the Gabba, that wicket was beautiful to bat on, and they just collapsed like a pack of cards. I mean, it was just horrible to watch, wasn't it? There was no spine, no attitude. They had a lot to play there and try and play out for a draw, and they just quickly compounded.
He's so out of nick, poor old Ben Stokes. I mean, he's a world-class player, but we've seen players come back from having played in the IPL and the T20 World Cup and come out here and struggle because, they haven't played long-form cricket. But he's come from nothing. He's come from doing, you can do all the practice you like, but he just looks so out of nick. But, he maybe you can get enough work into yourself. You can score some runs there at Adelaide. But it's all Joe Root, isn't it, if it's not anyone else? Let's have a look at the BBL. Sorry, mate, Jared.
Yeah, I was going to say on the BBL, Jimmy, I mean, what you take here, we touched on this briefly last week. They've completely cooked this goose, haven't they? I mean, the crowds are horrible. I think the ratings from what I see are very, very poor. The social media following has to be, at least a third of what it was 2-3 years ago. We've got this long drawn out competition. We don't have the international flavour that we had. We've got game after game. We've got double headers occurring on the same day as a test match. The whole scheduling is just so wrong, isn't it?
Oh, I completely agree with that. And it's going to be interesting now. We haven't got a game in the BBL for a number of days. And is that going to be the little freshen up that we need? Is that something that we can be used? I think everyone is in agreement with the length of the competition and that a lot of the games have lost relevance. I still think people have an interest in the cursory glance and they want to know what's happening. But I think the length of the tournament, which is obviously, there's broadcast deals and these sort of things, which make it difficult to wind that back. But the lack of star power, I know for a fact, I've got more interested in the Big Bash in the last 48 hours or last 72 hours, seeing Dre Russell come out here. And one superstar player, I've switched on and watched the last Stars games. And obviously I have a very vested interest in this comp and I want it to be successful and we want to be turning over a lot of money. But we need to find a way to get these stars out there because all of a sudden it brings the level to another dimension. We had Chris Gale out here many years ago. You had De Villiers, these sort of players. And one player can start changing that mindset. A little freshen up here I think might be good going into the back end of the season.
I think it's really easy to apportion blame at the feet of Cricket Australia about, agreed around a broadcast deal. So I was doing some research on this. When they first started playing BBL 01, there were 28 games. When they played BBL 02, there were 32. And then they went bang, into your 40s. And now we've got 56 games plus 5 finals. So it's just an overload of cricket. The doubleheader thing is just ridiculous. You're oversaturating. So that's the one thing. So you can wind that back a little bit. The other thing is the crowds and the live sport element, especially in Sydney and Melbourne. So I very quickly looked at the crowds from last night in that Stars game against the Sixers, 11,070 And then I thought, that's a familiar figure. And I looked at the crowd announced at the SCG for the Sixers and Hobart Hurricanes, 11,037. And I'm like, that they're singing off the same hymn sheet, because at the SCG that night, there was no way there was 11,000 people at the ground. And it certainly didn't look like there was 11,000 people at the MCG last night. So they're cooking the books a little bit on that one. But I understand why people aren't going to. We've had these conversations. It's so easy not to. You're spoiled at home. The food's half the price, probably even more. You don't have to wait in long queues, and you don't have to wait in long car parks. And financially, it's much better. And you're really well served by both broadcasters at home. So, and the COVID hesitancy is very real. Like people are going, great, we're out, but I don't want to expose myself. And what we're seeing now is, hey, you're a close contact. You have to isolate for 7 days or 14 days or whatever it is. People aren't wanting to do that, especially this close to Christmas.
Oh, there's no doubt the COVID impact over the last couple of years, and most notably right now, Jimmy. But those first 3 seasons of Big Bash, where they had it right, where it started and coincided with the school holidays. And so you had not only people sitting down at night every night watching that game, but it got the younger audience involved, but also the female audience involved. But even 3 years into the BBL, here in Brisbane, regardless of how well the Heat were going, you could not buy a ticket to go to a game. It was sold out. And all of the corporate facilities were sold out at the Gabba. And they were getting, 40-odd thousand to each Heat game. And you also knew that the Heat were only going to play, I think back then it was maybe 6 home games. And so it became a prized possession. Now, you're up to 61 games, including the final series. I haven't watched anything with any intent. And there are so many other people I think are clearly just turning off and not turning up.
We spoke on air today to Lachlan Furnell from the Cricketers Club of Queensland. That game on Sunday that's scheduled for the Heat, first game at the Gabba, almost sold out. So it's, the thing that you're saying about Brisbane's bucking the trend to Sydney and Melbourne, which is interesting. I spoke to someone at Fox when I was out at the game the other day, and we all think, the broadcasters just want more content. No, the pressure didn't come from the broadcasters to Cricket Australia. The pressure came from the venues. So the venues are looking at, hey, look at the SCG. They get the Swans games there. They get the 5 days of the Test match. They'll get a couple of one-days. If they can fill it up with an extra 4 Sydney Sixers home games, that's a significant increase of their bottom line. That's where the pressure came for Cricket Australia to have more home games, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the key difference with the Heat, obviously getting a big crowd there on Sunday looking likely, is that the game's been on the Gold Coast. They've been there, and it is that prized possession, Gerard. Like, everyone wants to get to their first home game of the Heat. They want to see it. They've had the Test match, so it'll be interesting what Game 2 and Game 3 looks like after which I agree with both of your points. It's a really interesting time. It's going to be interesting what little tweaks we make going forward in the next season, because it still is a very, very entertaining concept. It's still a very, very high quality affair, and it still engages a large number of people. So we don't need to go and throw the baby out with the bathwater. We just need to make a couple of minor tweaks, and I think it can come back bigger and better.
To watch Glenn Maxwell bat last night, it's mastery. It's just amazing. Albeit, okay, he got dropped on 15, but he just plays cricket shots that are just beyond belief. So looking at the market, Scorchers $3.70. They're a great franchise. They keep getting it done. Sixers $4. Stars $5.50, Hurricanes $6.50, Thunder $9.50, and then you go all the way out to the Strikers at $17. They just find a way to not get it done, the Stars. So I'm looking at those first two, the Scorchers and the Sixers. They're winners, not just on the back of that great Josh Philippe performance last night, but if you're looking at Colin Munro over there at the Scorchers, they just the only thing that would make me concerned around the Scorchers is the lack of cricket in Perth. And that might play against them. And you would think there's absolutely zero chance that even if they earn a home final, they're not going to get a home final, with February 5 being the date there that the Premier has announced. So, you start looking at that and you think, well, the Sixers are at $4 represent a bit of value in my mind.
Oh, well, I think that the week that the season started, Jimmy, I nominated. I know it's difficult to go back to back to back, but the Sixers again at $4.40 then to open the season, I thought with a play. Again, they've still got a very strong side. they'll have a very good result here in Sydney. And gee, it's so upsetting to watch the Stars really struggle, isn't it? I mean, they just look to have the Collingwood wobble about them, don't they? And year after year, there's lots of money thrown around by that ownership, and year after year they underperform.
The thing that we've got to be mindful of, and another reason where, and I don't know what the absolute solution to this is though, but the thing that always frustrates me is by the time you get to the finals and the crucial games, a lot of your players that have got you there, like your Glenn Maxwells and your Stoinis's, are not going to be available for a lot of those final games, depending on the timing of it all. So that's always been a big issue for the Stars. They've got this star power, but then when the games come that matter, that they're unable to play. So it's a real interesting one. That the Perth, as you say, have got such a strong team, but the difficulty of where that home final is going to be, it's such a crucial element. And the Sixers just know how to win that. They showed it again last night. I've never seen a side get beat by over 100 in a game and then go in as $1.50 odd favourites against the same opposition not long after. And the Sixers showed that they could get the job done again.
Yeah, they got the nice balance. Remember that last year, Tommy Curran, who was so good for them the year before, didn't come out. I know he took a bit of stick against Hobart, but he's a class player. So great new talent coming in essentially for this season. All right, I know we're talking about the impact of COVID on the Australian cricket side, but we've also had a reminder of how impactful this is going to be across the winter sports. Of course, we've had our scares in the NRL, beyond scares, COVID positives now. A Newcastle player has tested positive. A Canberra Raiders player now has tested positive. This is we've had emerging Blues camp that's been impacted. 75 plus players and staff have been forced to isolate for 7 days. I think, and based on what we're hearing from Andrew Abdo, is that rapid testing, whenever anyone goes to a training session, increased biosecurity levels, I think all that's going to be pretty commonplace. But I think what's going to happen now, and we're seeing it with the test match in Adelaide, and that is that much like the NFL and the NBA, that when there is a positive, that player is withdrawn, but the show must go on.
And Jimmy, the key in the next season is there's not going to be the isolated protection of being able to move the competition to Queensland, because all of these states are going to be open, and it's going to be a flow-on effect. You're 100% right. And what impact this then has on training preparations through the middle of January onwards into February, and then into competition period into March and April, it's going to throw things into disarray week after week. And only you have to look at what's going on in the US at the moment. And we touched on the NBL and the NFL. I mean, I think this week in the NFL, there's over 120 players already stood down with protocol for COVID. And there's 4 or 5 teams severely impacted, and some of the line movements, I mean, there's one line there that's gone 7 points in 2 days in the opposite direction. So that's going to be a part of all sport that we see next year, but in particular AFL, NRL and the rugby union here in Australia.
Just quickly then, thoughts on Nick Kotrick back to the Canberra Raiders. That was announced today. Hasn't been announced officially. From what I understand, Junior Paulo re-signs with the Parramatta Eels. Both fine players, but as I always say, Tristan, about this, all depends what you're paying them.
It does, and we've seen a lot of what the moves the Bulldogs have been making over the last few months, and you wondered whether there was going to be something of this effect to try to lessen that wage load for next year when a few of the players are coming in. So obviously, it seems like there's been a mutual agreement to get Nick back to to his previous team, which I'm sure will work out. He's been a very, very solid player, but I think maybe the difference is probably when he was signed on that big money deal with the Bulldogs, they were forcing the envelope there last year. Maybe they just changed tact a little bit now, and the Firehawks, I think they thought they were pretty confident of getting Paulo, and it looks like he's going to stay at Parramatta. So it's just more and more players are sticking. It's a really interesting time because the heat's starting to wind up on that team. I know the NRL will be very desperate for them to be a competitive outfit, but they're missing a lot of players at the moment when they've got a big war chest to throw at a number of players, which is very, very interesting.
Yes, I think these moves, as we've touched on before, will just keep rolling through these next 6 weeks. I believe the Eels now have announced this morning the re-signing of Paulo, Jimmy. So that is now official. And
Right.
gee, I'm sure he got a pretty penny. I mean, with the Dolphins, I'm sure climbing all over him with a big money offer. He's been able to re-sign on a very lucrative deal. A good get for the Eels, and they certainly need one at the moment. Lots of pressure on what they end up doing with their signings and their recruitment through the next 12 months. And in the background there, the Dolphins have not really struck a blow. It's going to be a very interesting watch over the next 3 or 4 months for them as well.
3 signings today for the Dolphins. I don't know who they are. I'm not saying they're not good players, and I'm not saying they're not going to be good players, but it's not Kalen Ponga or Brandon Smith, which is that marquee one that they're looking for. So Junior Paulo, absolutely strong negotiating hand when you're going into that one. So because they needed to hang on to him, Parramatta. Just on Nick Cotric, incumbent Australian Test winger from 2019. He's a really interesting player. Everything he does is good. Certainly one of these guys that prepares himself in a great fashion. I'm not sure what his best position is. He might be a centre, probably best on the wing. He can't play fullback. So there's a ceiling about what you can pay them. The Bulldogs exceeded that ceiling when they drew him to the club. It was a really strange signing because he didn't sort of fit, or he didn't solve any of the problems the Bulldogs had. Now they go, okay, my information was it was 650 plus TPAs. Canberra are going to get him at 500, so the Bulldogs paying 150. As TPA should transfer over because remember they're not linked to the club. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But even Nick Cotric at $500,000 a year, I think that's the upper end of his value. He's a good winger, very good winger, but he's not a great winger. So that's my thoughts on that. We have no transparency on that. And if everyone goes, yeah, he's a great buy. Well, is he? I don't know. And that's why I think it's more transparency for the fans to be able to determine whether they believe he represents value or not, Tristan.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one thing from a Bulldogs fan's perspective is seeing, I feel like they're willing to admit that maybe there were a couple of errors in years gone by. And it takes a big sort of person or a big entity to say, look, we maybe got this wrong, and to cut your losses at a certain point and say, look, we're very confident in our direction moving forward. And I agree with you. He was overpaid and he was in the right spot at the right time there last year when he got that deal. So it's important not to double down and make those decisions worse. So they made some really, really good signings, and they're going to be a very strong force, in my opinion, in the next couple of years. And I think a little decision like this is one that would give me more confidence as a Bulldogs fan that they're certainly heading in the right direction.
And the noises continue that link Luke Thompson with the Storm, so that'll be very interesting to see whether the Bulldogs do want to make that move and free up a little bit more of their cap. I think Luke still has another 2 years to run on his deal, which I'm sure would be highly priced given that he's a English international. So there's a bit to play out there. Jimmy, I thought a very interesting article in the media over the last week highlighting and a very open and honest insights from Munster about the pressure and some of the pitfalls that he's had as a professional sportsman. And, again, an insight in that we know how strong a club the Storm are, but, any individual in any professional sport is at the victim of that pressure, having a lot of money in front of them, a lot of temptation, a lot of hanger-oners. I thought it was, a very open and honest insight. And, he's not the first and he won't be the last in any of these professional sports. We've now got to see what unfolds with Brandon Smith, whether he ends up staying with the Storm into next season or whether over the next 6 weeks there might be a few moves at foot there. Very interesting off-season.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a couple of things that come out. I think Munster's in for a massive season, pending he stays injury-free. I love the comment from Christian Welsh when, we're all excited about Cam Munster coming back to training 3 weeks early and he's lost 5 kilos. And he said, hang on a minute, he should be doing that. He's a 5'8". He should be winning the drill. I love that bit of perspective from the big front rower. Can't wait for that to roll around. We're in the middle of an NFL season, though. Give us your thoughts on week 14. I want to see your power rankings too, Gerard. I tell you what, watching most of that Green Bay game, he is a joy to watch Aaron Rodgers when he plays like that.
And to think that at Lambeau that the Bears, who are much maligned, were able to get out to a 27-point score and go into halftime at 27-21 on a 13-point line as underdogs. But everybody on social media, in particular the Bears supporters in the US at halftime, are saying, we know what's going to happen here. That man owns us. And then bang, he just had a second half performance where he just stood up and went whack, whack, whack. And they get out to a 15-point lead, cover the line, and a comfortable win. And Jimmy, I've been saying for 4 or 5 weeks, the Green Bay Packers are where I'm hanging my hat. You know, they were $9.50 to win the Super Bowl. They're still $7. I think in power rankings now, any of the respected commentators out of the US now have them ranked as number 1, and clearly they have the number 1 seed. They're 10-3. And the key thing is with the Packers, in the coming weeks, they are getting other key players back from injury that is going to make them so much stronger in the second half of the season. On the other side, we've got the Patriots. They've got a nice test this week. They come up against the Colts, and the Colts have been very well back because the Colts have a very strong running game and attack game that I think will trouble the Patriots somewhat. So that's a very nice test. I thought the other highlight of the weekend, Jimmy, and one of the things I love about NFL is if you've got a very clever attacking coach, some of the schemes and plays that they come up with are just outstanding. And the key one for mine was that Tampa Bay Bucks Buffalo Bills. Now, Tampa Bay got out to a very warm win and then went to overtime, and then their right edge receiver, Perryman, who had not touched the ball in the whole game, lines up on the very left edge. Sorry, he was left edge receiver. And then the way they ran the angles in the scheme, he ended up on the right touch line and receives the ball from Brady, runs the length and scores a touchdown. But if you go back and look at the magic of the decoys in that play, it was just brilliant to watch. I thought the 2 best plays of the week for the NFL, Jimmy. Let's go with one of the primetime games that starts the round. That's the Kansas City Chiefs, whose defense has just been so strong. They're up against the Chargers. I thought there was quite a good gap there between these two. The market's only -3. I thought it was much wider than that. So I'm happy to go with the Chiefs on the road to play the Chargers, -3 to $1.86. And then the other one, we've got the Atlanta Falcons playing the 49ers. 49ers got out of jail with an overtime win last weekend, but I do think that there's a big gap between those two. The line's only I say, it's -8. In favour of the 49ers. I thought there was a bigger gap there. So I'm with the 49ers to beat the Falcons at -8 at $1.79. So Kansas City to cover the line, 49ers to cover the line. They're the 2 NFL plays for the weekend.
What's the overs-unders on that Kansas City Chargers game, Tristan? And I ask that because Justin Herbert has been putting together some spectacular attacking performances. Obviously, I think he's thrown for 300 yards over the last 5 weeks consecutively. So interesting, because on the back of what Gerard's saying, that Kansas City defense is the best in the league. I think they've kept, for the last 5 games, every team under 17 points. So what is overs-unders on that one?
It's been a remarkable turnaround with Kansas City in their defense. The totals are 52.5. And I think it's going to be the way the game shapes up where, Justin Herbert likes to throw it. He likes the big dynamic plays. And does that open the game up more? And obviously we know Mahomes can do something similar. So they've been phenomenal, the Kansas City defense. Will Herbert be able to throw something different at them? And will Kansas be able to respond? It's a really intriguing game. And yeah, it's a big number considering the way the Chiefs have been defending in recent weeks.
Well, very quickly on that, your market average this season for total points is about 47. So we're looking at well above that. And a key number in overs and unders totals is 51. So we're chasing 53 if you're on the over, or under 52 if you're on the under. So yeah, I'd be edging slightly to the under, but staying out for mine. I'm happy to just be on the Chiefs to cover the line.
Yeah, it's a bad bet type. We've discussed that.
I just didn't think you were pulling them back hard enough on Tuesday, Jimmy.
Clearly not. Can I just say, what about that Devontae Adams fake to the outside when he did that? Like, it's just, there's so much goes on within one play, and that poor defender, like he just followed him to the outside. I mean, they are high class athletes.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, just relating the NFL back to the BBL. They kicked and bucked to get this season to go one extra game in the NFL. It's one of the biggest, highest quality leagues in the world, and we have a premium amount of games. And you look at the EPL; it hasn't changed in years. The number of games, it's just something that you get excited for those games on the weekend. The playoffs are so meaningful, and it's so important.
Well, the other key thing about the NFL season now too is that the buys are now all finished. So we've now got weekends to finish the 17-round season with no buys, but they now introduce games on a Saturday. So there'll be Thursday night in the US, 2 games on a Saturday, then your full slate Sunday, and then your Monday game. I mean, it's just perfectly set up for media.
Is that right? How long has that been, the Saturday games?
Well, I think last season, I think they did introduce a couple. But this week, we've got 2 games on Saturday, which, you've got the Patriots playing the Colts on Saturday. I mean, what a matchup. I mean, that's just going to be fantastic television.
I think it's the college football generally owns the Saturday over in America, and obviously we're moving towards the bowls and the different sort of concept in that. So I think, it just, the thing as well that goes unnoticed probably out here for us, but the way the divisions are set up and the rivalries of those double-header games, like when you get to the last round of a season in the NRL or the AFL or most other leagues in the world, a lot of games are meaningless and there's no way to combat that. But the fact that the last game of the season involves, divisional games where there's so much to play as well is another little one that they just do so right.
Well, I know a young bloke who's 11 years of age, now that he knows, rather than missing all the football because he's got to go to school on a Monday, he'll be very excited to know that there's Sunday games here in Australia. So that's good news. You talk about the increase, and what did I say earlier? The BBL went from 28 games to 32 to 56. The NFL increased their total number of games in the season by 6.25%. And they had to do a kicking and screaming. So, might be something there for Cricket Australia administrators or indeed venue operators on that one. All right, let's have a look at the racing this week. Back to HQ in New South Wales and, of course, down there at Flemington as well. What do you got for the listeners, Gerard?
Well, Jimmy, the really good news is that with you back in the country, we still found another winner last weekend. That's 3 in a week, 3 in a row. So now we're into a roll, 4 in a row. And I think the other really good news was that you were all over that winner last weekend. So you've probably paid for that return trip holiday from the US. I thought 2 very good meetings. We're at the premium venues of Randwick and Flemington, and I really enjoyed looking at the fields last night. There's still strong racing, even in the week before Christmas. But let's go to Flemington, race 7. I thought there was a really nice sprint race here down the straight, 1,200 metres. But number 5, horse called It's Our Time, trained by Danny O'Brien, very lightly raced. I think it's only had 6 starts for 2 or 3 wins, but in its first preparation was running in and around group and listed races and some very nice form lines. Returned from a spell with a really impressive first up win down the straight here at Flemington at its home track. But when it saw daylight late, it just lengthened like a very good horse. Its last 200 was the fastest of the day. It cleared out the win by a length, and it only got clear running late. I thought it looked very well placed here at $3.60, and maybe that price might have moved with you jumping all over it again, Jimmy. But $3.60 for Flemington, race 7, number 5. It's Our Time. Can we get 4 in a row, Jimmy?
Just say, it's been a bit of a move into 340 now, so the punters are over it. But I'm really excited about this race day. Like as you say, the big venues, your premium venues, Randwick and Flemington. You throw Queensland racing into the mix, which is just starting to heat up for that summer carnival leading into Magic Millions. We've got a really good meeting at Eagle Farm where we've got the Gold Edition plate as well as the Loney Stakes. So it's a really good summer day of racing, which I'm excited about, and I really think the Queensland race in particular has moved in a strong direction, and I think the next couple of weeks, culminating from our point of view on the Gold Coast at Magic Millions, just adds that extra element. When you've got 3 strong venues going toe to toe, and I know Perth racing have been in that space for a while as well over the last while, but it's just that different time zone. It makes it a little bit more difficult. But yeah, really, really exciting weekend ahead for racing fans.
Tristan, you think with Magic Millions in the second week of January, normally, if we were to total up some of those lunch bets that were owed, would that get us a corporate suit?
Well, what I'm thinking, I know there's a famous story about Magic Millions with Singo and shouting the bar. I reckon if Jimmy totaled up all his lunch bets owed, he might be able to pay for all the patrons to get a hot dog or something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure what the tally might be, but it could be in the ballpark.
just having a little bit of difficulty with my audio at the moment. So anyway, I haven't had a clue what you blokes were talking about the last couple of minutes. But you're right about the racing, and there's some really good horses coming back. I'll take you to race 3 at Randwick, gentlemen. Number 4, King's Trust. We'll be running around again. I don't know whether you're brave enough to go again, Gerard, but I'm just waiting a word from the stable about the chances of King's Trust. Tommy Berry rides for Terry Robinson there. I'm going to take you to race 10 at headquarters, the Schweppes Sprint over the 1,000 metres. We had a good look at it before, didn't we? I think we backed Renlat's Gem, number 6. In from 14s to 12s. Tommy Sherry claims 1.5 kilos as well for Sally Singleton. 6 wins from 14 starts, 1 from 2 at the track. The distance doesn't seem to be a problem as well. It looked like it was just about to pour here in Sydney, but the weather is supposed to be good for the next couple of days. So I'm going to presume a better than average track. So I'm going to go at that current quote, $12.350 the place, just to make it difficult for you, Tristan. 1 and 4, thank you. Could I go 1 and 4 there? So $20 the win, $80 the place. How's that?
Very good. That's a very good staking plan. It'll just mean if you get another second, you can jump onto the phone to Gerard like you did last week.
Yeah, and he'll probably want a lunch bet to finish in the top 5.
Wow. Hey, so hang on. Here's the other thing too. So you say England can't get 20 wickets, right? And I say they can with the bowlers they've got, but they can't with the mindset they've got. How do we make this interesting for the second test that's just about to start? Do we want to say if England take 15.5 wickets plus 15.5 wickets, then there's a lunch bet on that?
How's 15.5 close to 20?
Because the 20 wickets is they win the test match, and the market says that they're a 1 in 4 chance of doing that.
Well,
so I might well have been right that they can't take 20.
Just whilst you're thinking through this thought process, there's just been a really strong move right now, and Australia's out to $1.80, England into $2.90, and the draw is 7. So another big push for England. So I'll let you guys go back and continue that negotiation. I love watching Jimmy in action with his negotiating skills. He's introduced a new product to TopSport with the Sport Top Flack, and I'm looking forward to seeing this new lunch bet around the 15.5 this week, maybe 13.5 wickets next week.
Well, it's just been confirmed that Cummings is definitely out.
Okay.
And that Steve Smith is captain. So some breaking news there, and that's obviously behind the move there. Jimmy, you might have to move that up a little bit higher. I'm not going to give you the chance of at least getting 15 wickets and claiming any sort of win.
16.5.
All right. 16.
How many did they get in Brisbane in conditions that suited their bowling? What did they get? 11.
It's about as close as they're going to get the way they're going at the moment.
16.5.
All right, we'll do that. Now, Jimmy, I did happen to mention to you last week, and she played $3 to place last Sunday, La Tigressa at Tamworth. So there was a nice little collect. But Newcastle race 3, number 2 on Saturday. She's got a 7-day backup, gets to a distance that suits, drops in grade. So I think might be time for La Tigressa to go from a 3rd to a 1st. So that might be another little interest for you. We've got ownership in King's Trust, ownership in La Tigressa on the weekend. We've got lunch bets around the cricket. We've got the NFL. We've got the horse racing. Everything's on offer here.
And whilst we're talking about ownership in animals, there's the match races on at Wendy Park. I've got a little share in Bandit Ned that goes around, so we might get the treble, all 3 of us. So I think Bandit should be getting the job done, but he won't be any entertaining price, I wouldn't have thought.
All right.
Well, don't put the staff Christmas lunch on that one, Tristan.
And I'm not going to charge you any sort of fee for that new betting product that I've just introduced there. The overs and unders 16.5 wickets in a test match, I think. So what about? I like that. I'll tell you what. If it gets to 16, I'll be blowing up, Condon. I know that.
Sure, you'll be tuned into the toss as well, because I think the toss is going to have a very big impact in that market. Yes,
absolutely, the toss will. And now the final makeup of this team.
There's not often I've cheered for England in anything, but I just hope they take 17 wickets and lose. But anyway.
You better get on Twitter and start deleting a few of your old tweets about being un-Australian as well.
No, I'm still going for Australia to win. I just want Nathan Lyon to push it behind square to get the winning runs 8 down. That'll do me. That'll do me. Good on you, boys. Lots of fun. Really interesting, the sport that's taking place around the globe over the next week and a bit. And enjoy that. Enjoy the test match. Enjoy the racing on Saturday. That's fantastic as well. And we look forward to catching up again next week.
Thanks, guys.
Jimmy, can you have that credit card of yours turned on over the next couple of days? I think there's a couple of little functions and lunches we'll be attending, and we'll just try and bounce it through. Even Apple Pay will do.
Once again, having some audio issues here as we sign off. You've been listening to Market Watch, proudly brought to you by TopSport.com.au.